advice. So last week we looked at some of the ways that you can help to manage yourself to stay in control during a difficult conversation. It's not always the last conversation you're going to have with this person or in respect of this issue. So what I would say is that it's also important after the difficult conversation, and this is the part that a lot of people don't do, the post-mortem. So what are some of the questions that I think are helpful for people to consider after they've had a difficult conversation, perhaps after they've had a mediation session, to prepare for the next one, or to prepare for that first co-parenting discussion that they're going to have offline, i.e. outside the mediation? I think the first thing I would say is that praise sandwich. So what went well? What did you feel that you did that worked, either that helped the other person to hear what you were saying, that helped you to connect with the other person, that helped you to regulate yourself? What were some of the positives about that difficult conversation? Even if you didn't get what you wanted, how did you manage it well? So what are some of the things that you did well? The other thing is we also talked a little bit about trying to make some hypotheses about what is happening for the other person. So what are their positions? Why? What are the interests? What are the needs, fears, concerns driving their positions? What are some of the things that might be helpful to enable them to give me what I want and that I'm willing to give them so that they can get what they want? And I would say that what people fail to do, but I think is really helpful, is just consider, I made some hypotheses, I did a guesstimate. Was it right? If it was right, in what respects was that hypothesis right? And what does that tell me I need to do in order to prepare for the next conversation? And if it was wrong, if actually the guess was not great, then what do I need to adjust? What information was I able to extract that can now help me to adjust, to adapt, so that next time I meet them, and I've now got my goals very clear in my head, I know exactly what I'm targeting, what is most likely to help me achieve that with the other person? How am I most likely to be able to help them to give me what I need? So then we also need to look at the negatives. What could have gone better? Yeah. So what could I have done better? What were some of the things that I did that actually weren't that constructive? Yeah. Was I triggered? Did I fail to kind of monitor how I was feeling in the conversation? And before I'd realized it almost, that I was now too angry, too emotional to be able to do problem solving. So what are some of the things that could have gone better? What can I change for next time? So if these are things that could have gone better, what do I need? What skills, what tools, what ideas do I need to help me be more effective the next time we meet? And that can be a range of things. So it could be, I didn't have the right information. Actually, I need more data. So whether that's homework, or whether that's information that needs to be shared, or whether it's, I need to get some better legal advice. I need to not just have my lawyer say, you can ask for this in mediation, but actually understand from my lawyer, if the other person won't agree to do this in mediation, what are the alternatives? What's the backstop here? Is it court? Is it the solicitors might negotiate? Is it we never get a resolution? Yeah. So understanding what the alternatives are legally can be really helpful. I would also say just thinking about, okay, well, I did feel triggered and I monitored, so I got that right. And I was curious, but I didn't have anything in the moment that I felt I could do. So if that's the case, go back and watch the last episode, because there are some tips in that about what you can do in the moment. But it might also be that you're working with a professional, like a counselor or a therapist. A lot of my clients work with a mental health professional during the mediation process, and they can often give really helpful tips about tools. I mean, I've had clients bring in like a small stone that's very smooth that they can just hold, and it's very cool in their hand. I've had clients use rubber bands. So it's sort of a distraction technique. You pull the band, it snaps on your skin. It's a way of breaking that rhythm. I'm also working on a podcast at the moment with Monica Borschel, who was on some of the earlier podcasts, and she talks about some of the EMDR techniques. So maybe check that out. That would be episode 4 of the Behavior Sleuths. I'll put the link in the podcast. But there are lots of things that you can do. So what I would say is make sure, if you are going to have to go back into that conversation with the same person, if you're going back into the negotiation, if you had a co-parenting interaction that didn't go well. How do you make it better next time? Yeah. Don't accept that it didn't go well and that's it. You have agency and you have resources within yourself to make it better next time. Yeah. It only takes one person to change an interaction. So an example of this from my work life that I really remember clearly because it was so shocking to me. I was very stressed out at work. I went on a holiday to an amazing place. If you ever get to go, I would strongly recommend saying yes, called Chivasom in Thailand. And I spent an afternoon with a Thai Buddhist monk. And he was trying to teach me how to meditate, poor man, because it was not an easy task. And like many people, I found that no matter how quietly I sat or how much breathing I did, my mind kept racing back to what was going on. So he said, tell me some of the things that you're finding difficult. And one of the things that I was finding very difficult at the time was working with a sales trader who felt like was deliberately making my life hell and was really unpleasant in the way that he dealt with me. And the monk said something that I will never forget. And this is over 20 years ago. But he said, how lucky you are. And I was gobsmacked because I didn't feel lucky at the time. And he just said, how lucky you are that this person is willing to give you the gift of self-knowledge. That because of the way they're behaving, you now have more information about who you are, where your boundaries are, how you interact with them, and that self-knowledge is a gift that we don't get very often. So it was as you can kind of tell, a total reframe of how I was thinking about the interaction, which was not to be grateful for the gift that I was getting. But it was such a powerful idea. And he said, why don't you do this when you go back to this difficult workplace? Why don't you say, I'm going to treat this person who I'm really struggling to work with in a different way. I'm not going to react to him. I'm actually going to respond to him. And I'm going to try and change my mindset in how I think of him and how I behave. And I was like, okay, well, I can try anything, crazy as this sounds. So I did. And I have to say, it's hard work. So when you're trying to change an interaction, particularly if it's been established over a long time, and particularly if it's negative, it's really hard. But what happened is, after a month, I noticed that the way he came over and spoke to me, the way that we interacted was changing, and was changing in a very positive way. That by the end of 3 months, we were friends. And that, I remember sitting in a meeting and one of the other sales traders was kind of being difficult. And he jumped in to defend me and said, don't give Sala a hard time. I will never forget it. And I really wanted to go back and say thank you to that monk. Now, I have to say, you can't do it with everyone. And I certainly didn't have energy or capacity to use that level of energy to change the interaction with everybody around me, as people I worked with could testify. However, if the relationship is really important, if the goals are really important, it is worth considering. Can I change the way I respond? What would I need to do that? How could I do that in order to change the way they're responding to me? What's interesting is it works. It's just, it takes a lot of effort. So in family mediation, I think it's kind of easy to say, you know what, if I change the way we're interacting, perhaps this conversation becomes more constructive. Perhaps things are more amicable post-separation. Perhaps we can co-parent in a way that is more balanced, is easier for both of us, and that over time, that compounds. There's kind of a compounding effect to positive interactions. So I would say it's worth considering. It's an idea. Have a think about it. Yeah. So that's the end of the Difficult Conversations series. Next week, something different, but I will tease that later. So have a good week and I'll take care and I'll see you next week.